Thank you, Sam. Can you hear me?
That's very good, yeah. Excellent, thank you. And very clear
Okay.
screen as well.
Thank you very much. And I just would like to, you're right, I'm an economist, so I'm kind of, naturally looking into disaster risk reduction as an economist. And I see many issues that we need to overcome to push this agenda. I would like to thank ODI for putting out this publication, The Future Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction. And I find many of the questions that I have been raising in my own head on how to push forward disaster risk reduction is actually addressed here. So I think this is a very, very valuable publication and a very timely publication. And many of the things that you're talking about, making the case, for example, HFA has an important role to play, but it has to work together in partnership and support of other international frameworks. I mean, particularly the post-2015 development agenda that has been discussed is very important. And talking about integrating risk into development decision, it's a development concern. It is not just a disaster risk reduction concern. It's an important one. And I thought what was most telling was the page 20, when you put out the financing, the fact sheet for financing. And there are reasons at the very bottom of the page. It says the reasons for prioritizing the financing of DRR are not always clear. And I think this is really the fundamental problem, at least what I see in our region. Steve just mentioned, how it turned around in UK is by showing the cost of disasters and the savings that you can make if you do DRR ex ante. I think so. That is not done in many of our countries in the region. So basically, the cost not known, risk consciousness is very low. It's almost a response. We were in Maldives recently. We are helping Maldives to put together their development management, disaster risk management plan, because they're passing a bill in their parliament. The first question the finance minister asked was, why do I have to put 2% of my revenue budget? Because that was the cost estimate we gave to the finance minister. His question was, why would I do this if in the aftermath of disasters I get help? So that this response first is the attitude now, particularly in economic ministries, that has to be converted to this course. And it's the same story with international aid. Among donors, there are accountability failures. So I just would like to say that these reasons that you have given at that financing fact sheet is the reasons that we are holding this debate back. And I just we are, as you all know, we are having the ministerial meeting in disaster risk reduction next week in Bangkok. And I got one of my colleagues to give me the list of participants, and I said, okay, tell me the other ministries who are coming to this meeting other than the disaster management authorities. And we find there are 2,200 multi-stakeholders have registered, and we find only 11 ministries coming from other countries. Other than the NDMOs, only 11 people out of these 2,200 are represented by other ministries, like I have the General Water Resources and the Ministry of Public Works of Indonesia, and the 4 of them are, of course, coming from Thailand, one from the Ministry of Transport, Natural Resources and Environment and all that. But nonetheless, it's only 11 ministries. So what I see in this discussion is, it is unfortunately a discussion, at least in our region, it's a discussion that is being taken place among the converted. We always gather for disaster risk reduction, and we always gather the NDMOs, National Disaster Management Officers. And, they are converted, we are converted, and we have a conversation, and we all go home. And in many times, DRR remains it's a peripheral issue. And the NDMOs are in the totem pole of governments. They're at the very bottom end. They don't have a say. They cannot convince their economic ministries. They cannot convince their environment ministries to give some funds for climate adaptation, part of disasters. And they are normally considered as a response unit. So they don't have much of a voice in putting DRR upfront, into financing DRR upfront, into poverty reduction strategies of the countries, the national development plans, and now the SDGs, unfortunately. So, so I think this discussion that you have started in ODI is quite important. Because of that, we need to have a multi-stakeholder engagement to mainstream. We need to mainstream this issue. It cannot remain in the NDMOs. And if it does remain in the NDMOs, the disaster will be addressed always as a response and ex post. So a couple of things I want to put to you is to, we need to do much of the work on economics of disaster, this cost-benefit analysis that Steve just mentioned for the UK, how we turn around the mindset. We need to develop no regret policies that integrate DRR and CCA and sustainable development into the picture. I would like to mention here that we work also in Afghanistan. You know, in Afghanistan, the NDMO is part of the Prime Minister's office. So we thought, okay, they are very powerful. But then we find that they don't have any money allocated to them. But there is a huge budget comes to the environment ministries for CCA, climate change adaptation issues, and the environment ministry doesn't want to give one single dollar to the NDMO of Afghanistan, and NDMO is lamenting because there are a lot of issues they have are the climate change related extreme weather events, and they cannot be prepared because nobody is willing to give them money because that mainstreaming into climate change adaptation of disaster has not happened. So going forward, I like to mention a few things. I know Tom sent an email around about the OWG process, this open working group process for post-2015, and we need to play a big role. I think maybe this is the kind of the forum that we need to push it through, because really in our regions, NDMO are not in a position to convince their ministries of foreign affairs that ultimately, and the New York permanent representatives that ultimately go and negotiate for the sustainable development goals. And it has to be, probably has to be pushed off, you know, through groups like us. So I just would like to put that to you. And I think we need to also, one of the things that is happening with the HFA is HFA in the UN system is very much has remained in a very sectoral domain. It has also in the United Nations system, HFA has not been able to be mainstreamed, like the other issues like Beijing platform, the population debates. You know, they are everywhere. They are integrated into all our program structures. Everywhere we talk about Beijing issues, even in our work program on disaster risk reduction. Unfortunately, HFA has not gone beyond this ISDR's the realm of things. And one of the ways for us to do that is to push this agenda through regional commissions, through DESA of New York, because that's where you see the mainstreaming, that's where you see multidisciplinary approaches to development being taken place. So one of the things I think we need to do for HFA too, to have legs, and I don't know, legs or the wings to fly, is to be install these things, not just in the ISDR, but in the larger UN system. Then HFA too has to be incorporated into the UNEP's agenda, the United Nations Environment Program's agenda. It has to be in all the regional commissions agendas. It has to be hopefully in DESA when they write their economic report. But that has to be done, you know, that widening of the scope has to be done somehow, otherwise it would remain as a sectoral issue and it would remain within NDMOs in the countries, it would remain in ISDR in the UN system. And I think we are not doing justice to people who are extremely vulnerable to disasters. And if we let the HFA remain in a very small group within a very small group of constituency. Thank you. I think maybe Pooji wants to add some more.
Sam, if I may add just 3 very quick points on what Shamika has said. I think just to push the HFA a bit farther, there are three other things that we could think of. Number one is that many of this, as Thomas said, it's linked with accountability or lack thereof. And part of it is because the difficulties to make the work around disaster risk reduction more quantitative, if you like, to push evidence-based policy making and decision making. That has to do with data, with statistics, and a variety of other works to help decision makers make up their mind. Number two, disaster as such have transboundary feature. At least in Asia Pacific, you can say that quite loudly. Many of the hazards are crossing administrative borders. So is the solution. The solution to hazard tend to be transboundary as well. Now, this element stated in the HFA1, but sort of lip surface mentioning in towards HFA2. We thought this is area that we need to push from this perspective. And the third one, of course, is for many of the developing countries in Asia Pacific, one of the potential solution is in taking the advantage of science and technology as a make or break some of the solution that they can think of. We are not talking about the expensive one, but the one that could be shared through South-South cooperation, for example. Asia Pacific witnessed countries moving very fast to become very rich, but there are also poor countries everywhere, and there is mechanism to socialize or fiscalize these differences. So these are three additional things that I think make or break HFA in the coming years. Thank you.
Dr. Pujioni, thank you very much for adding to that. And Shamika, thank you very much. I suppose we're rich with facts this morning from the infographics presented here, but there are two facts, shocking facts that I've learned this morning. One is the fact that we're not taking action, but we can get 1 to 8 returns in our cost benefit of investing in disaster risk management, at least in the UK, if I understand you correctly, Steve. But yet only 11 out of 2,200 participants in the upcoming Bangkok meeting are those very people we need to reach. I mean, those are really two very striking gaps. And what an enormous communication gap there is between those two facts. And so what are we doing as a community to bridge that communication gaps? I mean, from the point of view of CDKN, my network, we seek to mainstream climate-related disaster management in what we do. We focus on supporting decision makers in developing countries in climate compatible development, and we see DRR as something that needs to weave through that, and it's our job to make that happen. So in looking at responses from you all now, because we have half an hour for a conversation, I'm really interested to know what each of you are doing, actually, a little challenge to address this mainstream. And many of you may be DRR insiders. If you're a DRR outsider, please declare yourself, and if you're someone who sees the way to do that mainstreaming, I'd be really keen to hear from you in particular, because I think we have been challenged on that a little bit this morning. So the floor is open to those online and those dialing in as well, and we have a system of sending emails. I think, how does it work? But I haven't received any yet, so please encourage those online to send something. So that means here in London, I'm going to start, and Amy has a mic for anybody who wishes to make an observation or put a question to the panel.